Well, Jake Roy is a collector best known for his focus on 90s era basketball cards. And with my prime childhood collecting years spanning from 86 to 96, his content fits right into my sweet spot, hitting all of those nostalgia feels for me. So I wanted to bring him onto the show to introduce him to anyone in our audience who isn't already familiar with his content. So Jake, welcome.
Mike, it's a pleasure. I've been a long-time listener, first-time caller, so this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, we've had a chance to interact online, sending some direct messages and things like that back and forth over the years, but I've never actually had you on the show yet, so I'm glad you're willing to spend a few minutes today to chat. How did you get started collecting?
Yeah, so a lot of people probably know my typical story, but there's a little bit of a preamble. So I'm gonna bring you way back and give you the whole story. So growing up, my older brother, he's 5 years older than me roughly, had dyslexia. So my parents, trying to help him through that, decided that a good thing for him to get into was sports cards, because he was interested in primarily baseball, and especially back in like the late 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of stuff you could read about, but also a lot of numbers on the back. So it was stuff to help him through his own interests work through his dyslexia. So growing up with a brother in the house that collected cards, naturally I was surrounded by them. And then I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was young, primary school. I went to a card shop with him and my dad, and I remember he was searching. He's a Raiders fan, so he was searching for Napoleon Coffin rookie cards. So trying to help him find some of those. And I remember the one that he wanted, I think, was an Upper Deck rookie card where Napoleon has his shirt off and just like the shorts, the Raider shorts. And I said I didn't like it because he didn't have his shirt on. So going there, my dad was interested in getting us all interested in cards. So he said, pick out a pack of cards and rip them open. So naturally I picked X-Men pack. And I actually still have a couple of the hits, Magneto and a couple other, kind of not worth much, but they're fun nostalgia pieces. So fast forward a couple more years, and it's the summer of 1995, and I would spend a lot of my summer with my grandparents at their lake house, and there was an Olympia Sports that had just opened up down the road, and one of their promotions to get people in the door was they would give you a free pack of cards when you came in. So 95, 96 NBA Hoops was out. And I went in there and got a free pack of cards as often as that store would let me. So my brothers and I and a couple of the kids that lived near us would go and we'd rip these packs and we'd trade the cards back and forth. So that summer I also made my first trade. I had pulled a Jalen Rose subset card, and my brother kind of swindled me and gave me a John Starks, which I, reluctantly got. But so that was really what got me started is ripping into those packs of basketball packs, the NBA hoops. And, from there it blossomed into, me really loving the sport and picking a player to collect and trying to get every single card of Penny Hardaway that I could possibly find.
So that was the origin. Actually, a Marvel pack was the first pack, and then basketball. Were you basketball only at that point, or did you also collect other sports? You mentioned your brother was after some football. Did you also collect baseball and football too, or when you kind of focused in on basketball, that was it?
Yeah, so naturally, baseball, there was just so much of it available that there was going to be some of that. In the 90s, thinking about, where I grew up in New England, the Red Sox, Nomar Garciaparra was a big time player. So a lot of the cards that I would get would be from like a local department store called Ames that's now out of business. So sometimes when I'd go in there with the money that I had saved up or earned through doing stuff around the house, I would just get whatever was available. So if basketball was there, I would get basketball, but if not, I would get baseball. And then football was definitely third for me at that point. But as a Packers fan, if I saw a Packer player on the front, I might go for that over baseball.
So you've mentioned a couple things here in the last minute that begs the question, right? You got into basketball, but you mentioned Orlando and Penny was your primary focus. Yep. You mentioned football was third, but your favorite team was the Packers. You mentioned growing up in New England. So typically when I talk to people from New England, it's the Patriots and it's the Celtics who are their focus. What was it about Penny and Orlando that drew you in, and what was it about Green Bay and the Packers that drew you in instead of kind of those other New England
Yeah,
teams?
so both great stories, but very different. So we'll start with Penny. So in the 90s, everybody knew the Bulls. I'm wearing a Bulls warm up right now. So my younger brother was a huge Bulls and Michael Jordan fan. And we always joked that he just liked whoever was winning, so naturally that was the Bulls. And my younger brother and I are pretty close in age. So I couldn't root for the same team as him. We have a lot of sibling rivalry between the two of us. So I wanted to root for somebody else. And the funny story is, so part of the context is you have to think back to the 90s, and we didn't have the high def TVs that we do now where you can see the sweat dripping down. Standard def, you're lucky if you can make out the numbers sometimes on the back of the player's jersey. So watching the Bulls with my brother, he's rooting for Michael Jordan. I saw there's another guy on the court that's playing really well. His name happened to be Scottie Pippen. So my dad's educating me a little bit about Scottie Pippen. I'm like, okay, maybe I can root for him, but he's on the same team. So then like a week or so later, we're watching another game, and instead of a team in red, we're watching a team that's wearing a blue jersey. And I see this guy that looks familiar. So I'm like, he's playing really well. I like him. So, I start paying attention. And then fast forward like another week or so, and the Bulls and the Magic are playing against each other. And at this point, I'm really confused because I see Scottie Pippen, who I knew was Scottie Pippen, and I see the guy on the blue team that I thought was Scottie Pippen because they looked similar. They both had kind of like that short fade. So I was like, does he have a twin? So now I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm pretty young. So my dad's explaining to me, no, that's Penny Hardaway, that's Scottie Pippen, and the difference between the two of them. So Penny Hardaway was obviously giving the business to Jordan. So I said, okay, now that's my guy. So Penny captivated me from that point forward.
So that was Penny. How about Green Bay? Where did that come from?
So that one's very different because so that one goes back to third grade. The most people that I grew up with were, rocking the starter jackets for like the Cowboys, the 49ers, stuff like that. So going into the playoffs and the New England Patriots make it with Bill Parcells and Curtis Martin, Drew Bledsoe and all those guys. So all these people who all year were wearing, Cowboys and the Niners are talking about Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman, Steve Young and Jerry Rice, all of a sudden start saying, I've always been a Patriots fan. I said, I can remember 2 weeks ago, you were not a Patriots fan then. So that really annoyed me that people were just like jumping on and just, claiming allegiance that they never had. So I said, just to kind of be the foil, I'm going to root against the Patriots and root for the Packers. So, went to a Super Bowl party with some friends and, our families, and I had all these Packers gear on, and the Packers won. So they made me right, and that made me feel great. So I was like, that's my team. I'm riding with them. The next year was a good year. They ended up losing to the Broncos, but, stuck with them ever since.
So the next thing I want to talk about, that was like the origin story, and I appreciate that. That was cool to listen to. I appreciate your kind of bucking the trend type mentality on these things. You don't want to go along with the mainstream of what everybody else is doing. I appreciate that a lot. So when you kind of moved throughout elementary school and into junior high, high school, did you continue to collect through that whole time? Did you take a break in your collecting, or kind of have you been pretty consistent throughout your life once you started?
Yeah, so I never really stopped collecting, but my collection has always, it's gone through different journeys, right? So yeah, I was a really heavy collector, especially in middle school. It was very definitely not cool, but I didn't really care. But I also had a few friends as well as my brothers that also collected. So, that was something that we could all bond together through. Going into high school, focusing a little bit more on sports, trying to talk to girls, not very successfully, I might add. Collecting wasn't as much of a priority, but it was definitely still something I did, at least every week. And I would get, boxes and packs of cards for my dad on, birthdays and Christmas. So collecting was always there. It wasn't as much of a focus. Going into college, it took a little bit more of a backseat, but every summer when I'd be home or every Christmas, I'd run to Walmart or wherever and pick up some retail packs and boxes. And I wasn't as keenly focused on like Penny Hardaway and some of my player PCs. I was just focused on having some fun ripping some wax. And then fast forwarding after college and a family, it again took a back seat, but then started to creep back up more and more as the kids were young and I was looking for some more nostalgia.
So you did continue to collect. I guess I'm a little curious now on, because you continued to collect through that whole time, your YouTube channel is, and your social handles and everything else is focused on 90s, right? The 90s basketball cards. And so as you continue to collect through that whole time, why, when you decided to start doing content, did you decide to focus in on the 90s era?
Yeah, so through all of that, the one thing is there was never a player that really captivated me like Penny did, and some of the other guys from the 90s, Iverson, Kevin Garnett, like those guys, I really gravitated towards their game. I liked watching them a lot. Not that I didn't like anybody in the modern era, but nobody really captivated me the same way. That coupled with the fact that I'm a heavily nostalgic person, that
Mm-hmm.
nostalgia of the 90s and some of those memories that a lot of those cards would conjure up in me, definitely was a winning factor. But the other thing is I just knew it better. When I was in
Mm-hmm.
elementary school and middle school, reading the Beckett's, like poring over them, studying them, the pack odds were something I was really interested in. So because I knew so much about it and I had a lot of nostalgia for it and the players really resonated with me, all of those factors just made that an obvious home for my collecting aspirations.
So, what prompted you to want to start making content? And was it video from the start, or did you ever, start with a blog, and go in, or did you consider doing a podcast, or, what was it that prompted you to start making content and then focus in on YouTube kind of being your primary venue for sharing that content?
Yeah, so really the genesis for it was when I started getting into cards online. A lot of my collecting was, just I would be kind of like that silent collector in terms of like the Instagram community, what we would consider them private collectors now. So when I started getting involved online, it was really on Facebook. The first Facebook group I ever joined for cards was a Penny Hardaway group started by Brian Wells, who has shipped my cards, if anybody's familiar with him. A great guy, and it's a great group. So getting back in there, I would see some questions that would pop up from time to time, whether it's about a product or a card or whatever. And a lot of the 90s cards, these questions would come up repeatedly. So I would try to help and I would answer in the comments. But I started to think, like, there's got to be a better way rather than repeating the same answers over and over and over again. Some people would be new to the group or whatever. Totally understand that. But I was like, how can we create something that answers these questions so people can just have a resource to go to? So that's where I started thinking, like, how do I solve that problem? And then to me, cards are naturally visual. It's hard for me to describe some cards. Sometimes you just have to see it. And other people are better with words than I am. But also sitting down and like typing a blog out was just something that seemed very monotonous to me. So I felt as though sitting behind a camera would be better for the cards. And the only way I could think to shoot it was to also show myself, because I wanted to feel like it was personal. And there were some influences from other people that were making content outside of cards. People talk about Gary Vee, so everybody watched his content at some point in time. So I wanted to have a personal connection with people that I was trying to help and show them the cards. So that's why I ended up leaning on doing it through YouTube, is to answer those questions, create the connections, but also show the cards.
What do you enjoy most about doing that? You've been doing it for a while now. You've had a chance to experiment with a few different things and a few different styles of content and that type of stuff. What do you enjoy most about making your content?
I think the thing I like the most is really those connections that it helps form with people. And there are so many people that I've met in the card world that I don't think I would have met or had as close of a connection with if I didn't make content. So I would say those connections and really strengthening those connections with people are the one piece that I enjoy the most.
You talked about Penny being one of those initial primary focuses, and I know you continue to have a Penny collection. What's that Hardaway collection look like right now?
It's expansive. So I actually went on to trading card DB and started logging my penny collection. So I'm up over 1,000 unique penny cards. I don't know the exact number because there's some of them that I have like tucked away, and I'm reluctant to put it on that database as having it unless I've set eyes on it. And some of my close friends who have like seen my collection, they joke with me that it's an assembly, it's not a collection, because my organization of it when I was a kid and I had more time to spend with it was, pretty meticulous, and it's not as meticulous as I'd like it now, but we'll get there over time. So yeah, but when I say it's 1,000 unique cards, there are multiple duplicates that I'm constantly going through and trying to cull through, get those in the hands of other collectors or other people who are going to appreciate them. Because as time goes on, I'm realizing that having, 5 copies of a card might not be what I need.
Are there other basketball players from that era that you kind of collect as well, just maybe not quite as expansively as Penny?
Yeah. So I did this is probably 2 years ago. I did like a collecting pyramid that I put on my Instagram, thanks to the sports card therapist Rob was the one that had shared that I thought was a cool idea. So Penny's definitely at the top of my pyramid. He's the head honcho. Below him is Iverson, then Kevin Garnett, and then it goes beyond that. So some of the other guys that are kind of like on the tertiary list would be Baron Davis, Lamar Odom, Vince Carter, Michael Finley, a little bit of Corey Maggette, some Packers sprinkle in there. So there's no shortage of fun that I can have when I go to a show.
Any modern people, or primarily just the 90s nostalgia guys?
Yeah, so I can't think of any modern guys that I actively seek out. Like if I'm ripping wax, I will hold on to any LeBrons, any Steph Currys. My wife liked both of those guys, and any John Morant's, because my daughter has decided that he's her favorite player. So I hang on to all of those for them. But there's no players that in the modern era that I seek out. Well, that's a lie. There is one. It's a football player. It's very obscure. Mason Crosby from the Packers is probably the only guy, and I just seek out, cool cards of his on-card autos. There's not too many, and then he's only in 1 year of Prism, so I'm trying to collect some of the more rare Prism cards of him from 2019.
I love that, and that's kind of the approach that I've taken with a few of my PC focuses as well, right? And so. From a basketball perspective, Jordan was my first love growing up in Central Illinois. I don't know that I had much of a choice, and Jordan is my first focus. But then, like recently, I started to focus in on what brings me joy, what makes me happy, what brings me back to those childhood times when those good times, I guess, of growing up. And one of those that I landed on recently was reflecting back on Tyrone Nesby.
Yep.
And so getting a chance to meet him when we were both in high school. He grew up in Southern Illinois and I was in Central Illinois. We were both at our state basketball tournament. I was in the 3-point contest and he was in the dunk contest, and I had a chance to meet him and get his autograph there. And so I was like, you know what? He had a fairly short 3 or 4 year run in the NBA. I should see how many cards he has and see what I've already got of his and see what else I can track down. And so I've started I pulled all those out. I've started to track down some of the other ones. And he's another one that's super affordable, right? And so I was able to pull together quite a few of those, and I'm kind of down to some of the one of ones and maybe some of the stuff that's serial numbered under 50 that's a little bit harder to find. That's kind of all I have left. Wow. And so I'm always kind of keeping an eye out for any of those Nesby cards that I may not have. But also a little bit of Bobby Hurley. I enjoyed watching him play when he was in college, and then got off to a early promising start as a rookie until he got into his accident and was never quite the same after that. So I've started to pull together a little bit of that focus on some guys, set those guys aside that do mean something to me from those days of high school and college and that type of thing. So I appreciate that idea of focusing in on those nostalgia guys from the past. Sometimes they're worth something, sometimes they're popular and have very expensive cards. And sometimes they're guys like Mason Crosby, a kicker who is not necessarily a super hot follow industry wide or hobby wide. I appreciate that. So thanks for sharing some of those. I saw recently that you're starting a new series on the channel. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so always trying to think of different ways to kind of serve the audience. So I got an idea from a different content creator who's in a completely different space, just talking about improving your videos. Was to do like a open office or office hours. I can't remember which one I'm calling it, but I'm calling it the Collector Open Office or Collector Office Hours, one of the two. I haven't landed on which one yet. But the idea is that people will ask a question, through the DM or a comment on whichever social media platform they're on. And I'll just shoot like a quick, 1 minute or less video answering the question. I thought it would be something quick and easy and fun, but also something I can do on the fly. I don't have to like set up the whole apparatus to create a video. But also sometimes for me, to be completely honest, when I'm making content, probably the least fun part of it is the editing. So doing a traditional Q&A, there's a lot of editing that I try to put in there. And it tends to not happen as quickly as I'd like it. And I think these 1 minute videos will be able to serve the same purpose, but do it in a much easier and more, I think it's going to be a little bit more of a approachable format.
I like that. And I like the idea of just experimenting with something different, mixing it up a little bit, I think is fun to do from time to time and keeps it fresh for both you as the creator as well as the audience. So I think that's pretty cool. I like how in your kind of intro, you said it doesn't necessarily have to be basketball card related or even card related. It could be other stuff that you're open to talking about. I think that's pretty cool. You're pretty active on social media, variety of channels, Twitter, Facebook, you mentioned with some of the groups, TikTok, Instagram as well, right? Do you have a favorite social media platform that you use to engage, or have you found the engagement level, your connection to your viewers and your community higher in one platform versus another?
Yeah, I think Instagram tends to be the place where I go the most. And I think most people are that I engage with on a regular basis. I don't think many people are on TikTok yet looking for cards, but it's definitely growing. Most of the time when I'm on TikTok, it's really, looking at comedy stuff or, kind of funny things, but also I enjoy going on TikTok just to kind of try to get a little bit of inspiration for other stuff that I might put out. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's really good for kind of that creative juice flowing when I'm looking for a boost. Twitter is probably the place where I am the least, and it's been hard for me to find, basketball collectors, like people that collect the things that I'm really interested in. There's a lot, like I know you're very active on Twitter. There's a lot of really great collectors. So when I'm looking for something outside of my typical 90s basketball wheelhouse, I think that's a fun place to go, especially for baseball. I find there's a lot of people talking about it there, but Instagram is where I typically reside.
See, I've done things the opposite, and I don't know that that's good. Twitter's been my primary source. TikTok has come on for content creation for me as well. I find, especially creating short form video, the editor, the ability to create on TikTok to me is much easier than trying to just natively do a YouTube or Instagram reel or whatever. And so a lot of times I will create on TikTok, leverage that video to then share on Instagram or YouTube. But I was slow to get on Instagram. The interface just seems much more clunky to me, probably because I'm old, and so I've been slow to adopt Instagram, slowly ramping up there, but I feel like I missed out on a lot of that community. I would agree with you that I think there's a very heavy focus or presence on Instagram that I've missed out on. And I was also slow to get onto YouTube as far as creating content as well. It's just been this last several months that I've been proactive on trying to share some of these conversations that I've been having over the last few years that I've been doing the podcast in video format too. I had strictly been audio only through that whole time, and I had not been sharing any of the video, even though they're all video conversations. And so I feel like I've had the opposite two focuses, which has been fine, but I feel like I've also missed out a little bit. So I was just curious on what your approach has been, kind of why, and your logic on how you've, approached those two things, or those different areas, because it seems like every collector or every content creator has a slightly different take on the different options.
And I think Instagram also was an area that I wanted to look into, again, because of my feeling of like, I wanted to see cards and share what the cards look like. And, Instagram was originally created to be a photo sharing platform. So I think if I was to get into it now, like if I was to just start getting into like online card spaces, I think Instagram would be very intimidating for me because, when I got my Instagram account, there were not nearly as many people on there for cards. I mean, there was still a very large community, but not nearly as many people as there are now. And I think the community also was a lot different because there were so many fewer people making content then that it was really just a lot of people sharing their collections. And now you definitely get some of that, but sometimes you have to search for it and wade through. Some people are only promoting content, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I definitely do that on there as well. But if you're looking for a specific focus, it's not as easy to find as I think it used to be on Instagram. So I just feel I can understand how it would be intimidating for somebody to try to join there now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, I appreciate you spending some time with us today, giving us your background, telling us a little bit more about your channel. Definitely encourage people to check it out. But if somebody does want to check it out, if they're not already familiar with you, where can they find you and where can they find your
definitely.
channel?
So like you mentioned, I am 90's _b-ball _cards on pretty much every platform. So YouTube for the videos, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. My page is actually 90 b-ball cards. I forgot to put the S in there when I was creating it, and I'm just I haven't gotten around to figuring out how to change it. So that's just one of the quirks of me now.
I appreciate it again. I will also put links to all of Jake's stuff in the show notes, and so if you didn't catch that for some reason, you can check down below in the show notes, and I'll have links to everything as well. But Jake, thanks for spending a few minutes. I love your passion for the 90s. That's right in my sweet spot too. And so thanks again for coming on today.